stitch markers are a notion that you use both in knitting and crochet. I'm going to show you 3 of the most common type of stitch markers out there, but know that there are lots of varieties of stitch markers for you to choose from, and it's really about finding the stitch marker that's going to work best for you and your project. The most common ones you'll find are ones like this. They are typically made of plastic, and they are a locking stitch marker, and they almost look a little bit like a safety pin without the coil. And so these really have a lot of great uses in your knitting project. For example, I have just a little swatch of knitting here, and you might use this type of stitch marker to keep your place if you want to remember that you have a little edging on your project, for example. I might just place one of these stitch markers here and then work down my row, and then a pattern might tell me to place a stitch marker, so I could just grab another one, close it up, and stick it on the needle just like that, and so on. And so that is, like I said, probably the most common type of stitch marker that you will find, and again, they're great for both knitting and crochet. Similar to these are what I typically call like a light bulb stitch marker. They have different names, and they really do look a lot more like a safety pin, but they have a little bit of a bulb on the end, so that's where the name light bulb comes from, because it kind of looks like an actual light bulb. And these you can use in the exact same way. So you're knitting along here, and you could just take one of these and just place it right on your needle like that. One thing that's really great with both of these types of stitch markers is that they're also really great for marking other things on your project. So for example, this is the right side of my fabric here, and let's say I was having a hard time keeping track of the right side or wrong side of my fabric. Well, I can just take one of these locking stitch markers, whether it's this plastic one here, or I have another one of these metal light bulb stitch markers here, and you can just work it right into the fabric wherever you need to mark your place. So I like to use these commonly to mark the right side and wrong side of my work. These stitch markers are also really great for those situations where you have to work a specified number of rows or rounds in your project, so you could just mark one stitch and then count up from there. The last type of stitch marker I want to show you is the split ring marker, and I have a few of them here. And it's all in the name. It's a ring that is actually split. So there is space there so that you can hook it onto different parts of your project. So you can use this just like your other locking stitch markers. We can place it through a particular stitch to mark the right side or wrong side. If we now just come to the next row of our work, we can work a few stitches and then place it on the needle and keep on going. The only thing with the split ring marker to keep in mind is that it doesn't completely lock, obviously. It is still open. So if you have a project where you're doing a lot of yarn over, something like a lace project in knitting, you just want to be careful if you're using this type of stitch marker, because sometimes those yarn overs can kind of slip to one side or the other, with the split rings especially. But where I really like to use the split ring markers is when I'm crocheting small projects in the round, something for like an amigurumi toy, something like that, where if I'm working in continuous rounds and I want to be marking the first or last stitch of every round, depending on your pattern and what you like to do, and you're having to move that stitch marker up every single round, I do like the split ring markers for that application specifically, since you're going to be constantly taking it out and back in. It just makes it a little bit faster with that split ring marker. So those are 3 common stitch markers for you to try in your knitting and crochet projects.